You already know who you want to be. You have seen that version of yourself in your mind, the one who does not hesitate, the one who is not controlled by fear or comfort or what other people might think, the one who makes decisions cleanly and lives with them fully and does not spend 3 hours at midnight replaying conversations and second-guessing choices. You know that person. You have always known them. The only question is why you keep letting someone else show up instead. This audiobook is the answer to that question, and more importantly, it is the beginning of the end of that problem. The cold version becomes someone even you don't recognize. Introduction. Most people are living as a rough draft of themselves. Not because they are lazy, not because they lack intelligence or talent or desire, but because nobody ever told them that the first version of a person is not the final version, that the identity handed to you by your childhood and your environment and the repeated opinions of people who knew you before you knew yourself is a starting point, not a destination. You are allowed to rewrite yourself. Not slightly, not around the edges, completely, from the foundation up. This is what the cold version means. Cold not as in emotionless or detached, cold as in clear, uncontaminated by old fear, unbothered by old limitations, operating from a place of such internal solidity that the things that used to shake you simply do not reach you anymore. This audiobook is about becoming that. Chapter 1, the draft you are living in. Think about the beliefs you carry about yourself right now. Where did they come from? Did you sit down one day with full information and full awareness and full freedom and choose them deliberately? Did you evaluate the available options and select the ones that would serve you best across the full length of your life? Of course not. You inherited most of them, from parents who were doing their best with their own inherited limitations, from teachers who were managing classrooms, not crafting identities, from peers who were just as lost and scared as you were but expressed it as confidence or cruelty or indifference, from experiences that hit you before you had the tools to interpret them accurately. You were handed a draft, and then you were told, implicitly and sometimes explicitly, that the draft was the final version. It is not. The cold version of you did not inherit those limitations, not because they had a better childhood or better luck, because at some point they made a specific decision that most people never make. They decided that the story they had been given about who they were was not binding, that it was a starting point they could edit, rewrite, or throw away entirely and begin again. That decision is available to you right now. Not tomorrow. Right now, in this moment, you can decide that the draft is not the final version, that the identity you have been performing out of habit and familiarity and fear of what change might cost you is not who you actually are. It is just who you have been practicing being. And practice can change. Chapter 2, what the cold version believes. The cold version of you has a specific internal architecture. It is not complicated, but every piece of it is different from what most people are carrying. First, the cold version believes that they are responsible for everything in their life, not guilty for everything. Responsible, there is a profound difference. Guilty is about blame. Responsible is about power. When you believe you are responsible for your life, you are claiming the power to change it. When you spend your energy assigning guilt to your past, to other people, to circumstances, you are giving that power away. The cold version does not waste a single moment on blame, not because they have had an easy life or because nothing unfair has happened to them, but because they understand that blame, however justified, is a trade. You trade your agency for the satisfaction of being right about who wronged you, and the cold version is not interested in that trade. Second, the cold version believes that discomfort is directional. When something feels uncomfortable, most people interpret that as a signal to stop. The cold version interprets it as a signal that they are moving in the right direction, toward something that matters, toward the edge of what they have done before, which is the only place where growth exists. This one belief, held consistently, changes everything. Because the number of things available to a person who moves toward discomfort is vastly larger than the number of things available to a person who moves away from it. Third, the cold version believes that they do not need to be understood. This is quieter than it sounds. It does not mean they are arrogant or isolated. It means they do not require external validation to act. They do not need people to agree with their choices before they make them. They do not need approval before they begin or applause before they continue. They act from internal reference, and this makes them essentially unstoppable. Because the only thing that can stop a person who acts from internal reference is a reason that lives inside themselves, and they have learned to manage that territory well. Chapter 3: Burning the habits that are keeping you small. There are things you do every day that are directly responsible for keeping you in the draft. Not dramatic things, small things, so small and so habitual that they feel like neutral behavior rather than choices, but they are choices, and they are costing you more than you know. The habit of explaining yourself to people who have not asked. The habit of shrinking your ideas before you voice them, so that they are easier for other people to digest. The habit of saying yes when everything in you means no, because yes is easier in the short term even though it kills something in you every time. The habit of checking how you are doing against other people instead of against your own potential. The habit of waiting to feel ready before you begin. The habit of treating your own needs as the last item on a list that is always too long to reach the last item. These habits are not personality traits, they are patterns, and patterns can be interrupted. The interruption does not have to be dramatic. It does not require a grand moment of decision witnessed by anyone. It just requires that the next time the habit reaches for the wheel, you put your hand there first. The next time you start to shrink an idea before voicing it, voice it at full size and see what happens. The next time you feel the pull to say yes when you mean no, say no and stay in your body while you do it, and notice that the world does not end. The next time you feel the urge to wait until you are ready, begin and let the readiness catch up to you. One interruption is not a transformation, but one interruption repeated daily becomes a new pattern, and a new pattern held long enough becomes a new identity. Chapter 4: The Respect Equation. Here is something that very few people understand about self-respect. You cannot think your way into it. You cannot affirm your way into it. You cannot visualize it or journal about it or talk yourself into feeling it. Self-respect is not generated by thoughts about yourself. It is generated by the consistent experience of keeping promises to yourself. Every time you say you are going to do something and then you do it, you make a small deposit into your self-respect account. Every time you say you are going to do something and you do not, you make a withdrawal. And most people have been making far more withdrawal than deposits for far longer than they realize. The result is an internal account that is overdrawn, a self that does not quite trust itself, a confidence that is conditional, present when things are going well and absent the moment things get hard. The cold version has a self-respect account that is deep and consistently funded, not because they have never failed to keep a promise to themselves, but because they have made the keeping of those promises a priority over time, and the accumulated deposits have built something solid. You rebuild this account the same way you build any account, one deposit at a time. Make a small promise to yourself today, something specific and achievable, and then keep it, not because of what it accomplishes practically, because of what it tells you about yourself, because of the deposit it makes. And then do it again tomorrow. The cold version is built from these deposits, from the unglamorous, daily, private practice of being someone who does what they say they will do, first for others, then, and more importantly, for themselves. Chapter 5. The identity you perform in public. There is a version of you that performs for other people. This is not necessarily dishonest. Humans are social creatures, and social performance is part of how we navigate collective life. The version of you at a job interview is a performance. The version of you at a first date is a performance. The version of you in a difficult conversation with someone you love is, at least partly, a performance. But here is where it becomes a problem. For many people, the performance version becomes the only version. The character they play for other people becomes so dominant, so practiced, so automatic, that the private self underneath it begins to atrophy. And the questions about who you actually are, what you actually want, what you actually believe, become genuinely difficult to answer because you have spent so long not asking them. The cold version has a strong private self, a rich interior life that does not depend on audience or context or other people's expectations for its definition. Building this private self is one of the most important things you can do. It starts with learning to spend time alone without filling the silence, without reaching for the phone or the television or any other device for distraction, just sitting with yourself, getting comfortable with your own company, learning what thoughts arise when there is nothing to perform for and nowhere to be and no one to manage. This is uncomfortable at first, especially if you have been performing for a long time. The silence can feel accusatory. The thoughts that arise without distraction can be ones you have been successfully avoiding with busyness. But those thoughts are information. They are telling you where the private self actually is and what it actually needs and who it actually wants to become underneath the performance. Listen to them. They are the most honest data available about what your rebuild needs to address. Chapter 6. How the cold version handles failure. Failure is not the problem. Your relationship with failure is the problem. The cold version fails, regularly, significantly, in ways that hurt. The difference is what they do with the hurt. Most people use failure as evidence. They stack their failures into a case against themselves. This is who I really am when things get hard. This is what I always do. This is proof that the limitations I suspected I had are real. The cold version uses failure as instruction. Something went wrong. What was it specifically? What does that tell me about what I need to learn or adjust or strengthen? How do I use this information to make the next attempt better? The shift from evidence to instruction is not a small one. It completely changes the function that failure serves in your life. Instead of being a reason to contract and protect and pull back, it becomes a reason to get more precise and more capable and more prepared. And here is something important about this shift. It does not require that failure stops hurting. The cold version still feels the sting of a significant failure. They are not emotionally numb. They are emotionally processed. They allow the feeling to move through them without letting it become a story about their identity. Hurt and then extract the lesson, and then return to the work. That is the full sequence. And the speed with which you can move through that sequence is a direct measure of how far the rebuild has progressed. Chapter 7. The long game. The cold version plays a different game than most people. Most people are playing a short game. They want results that are visible and validating in the near term. They make decisions based on how things will feel in the next hour or the next week. They measure their progress against what is immediately visible and get discouraged when the visible does not match the desired quickly enough. The cold version plays the long game, and this changes everything about how they live. When you are playing the long game, today's discomfort is obviously worth it. Today's sacrifice is obviously worth it. The decision that costs you something now but builds something that matters over time is obviously the right one. There is no internal conflict because the long game has already resolved the conflict. The question is never whether the sacrifice is worth it. The question is only whether this particular sacrifice is aligned with the long-term direction. Playing the long game also changes your relationship with other people's timelines. When you are in the short game, other people's visible success is threatening. When they move faster, achieve more visibly, seem to have what you want before you have it, it destabilizes you. Because in the short game, you are measuring yourself against them. In the long game, you are measuring yourself against your own potential. And your own potential is not in competition with anyone else's. It is a completely separate territory that only you can explore, and only your choices can develop. The person next to you having a great year does not diminish your decade. The person ahead of you today will not necessarily be ahead of you in 10 years, because the long game rewards consistency and depth, and the kind of patient daily work that most people find too boring to sustain. Commit to the boring daily work. It is the least glamorous and most powerful thing you can do. Chapter 8, Becoming Unrecognizable. Here is what the finished product looks like. Not perfectly, because the cold version is never finished, but here is what becomes true for the person who has genuinely rebuilt. They walk into rooms differently, not with arrogance, with settledness, with the specific quality of presence that comes from knowing who you are and not needing the room to confirm it. They speak differently, less to fill silence, more to actually say something. Their words carry weight because they are not diluted by constant hedging and qualifying and seeking permission to have an opinion. They make decisions faster, not rashly, fast, because they have clarity about their values and their direction and their non-negotiables, and decisions that are properly filtered through those things do not require extended deliberation. They are harder to destabilize, not because nothing affects them, because they have built a foundation that can absorb impact without cracking. The bad news still lands. The difficult conversation still costs something. The failure still stings, but none of it reaches the root. None of it touches the core belief in who they are and what they are capable of. And perhaps the strangest thing, they become unrecognizable to people who knew them before, not because they changed their appearance or their name or their circumstances, because the quality of person who shows up is so fundamentally different from the previous version that the external sameness becomes almost irrelevant. This is the cold version fully expressed, and it is available to you, not as a fantasy, as a destination that can be reached by the same road everyone who has ever gotten there traveled. The daily choices, the private practice, the consistent return to the work after every setback, the long game played without flinching. Conclusion, the version that was always waiting. The cold version of you is not a new creation. It is not something foreign being imported into your life from outside. It is not a character you are putting on or an identity you are borrowing. It is you, stripped of the fear, stripped of the inherited limitations, stripped of the performance for people who were never going to be satisfied anyway, stripped of the stories that were told about you before you were old enough to tell your own. It is the version of you that was always underneath everything else, waiting, patient, available. The only thing standing between you and that version is the daily choice to act like they are already here. Not when you feel ready. You will never feel ready for the version of yourself that is bigger than the version you have been. Not when circumstances improve. Circumstances improve for the person who has already made the internal shift, not before. Not when someone gives you permission. Nobody is coming to give you permission, and if they were, the cold version would not need it. Now. Begin now. Choose now. Show up as the cold version in the next small moment that asks who you are. And then the next one. And then the one after that. Until the question of who you are has been answered so many times, in so many moments, in so many small private choices that nobody witnessed, that the answer becomes automatic. until the cold version stops being something you are working toward and becomes simply who you are. That day is coming. Go meet it.